So now think about that. 3 sets of the number 72, combined with the imagery and the occult numerology of number 1, the Osiris obelisk, number 2, the Isis dome, and number 3, the oracular great seal, all of which are richly symbolic of the prophecies of the return in the future of this Apollyon Antichrist character. Now, loosing and binding, controlling these 72 demons for the purpose of reestablishing this pagan order on earth, this new world order, is very important, and that is how these pentagram images come into play. There has been an important part of the secret doctrine of the high degree Masonic Illuminatus since its inception. And it has to do with the inevitable worship of Osiris, Apollo, being reestablished on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
For the prophecy that is upon the Great Seal, for the secret doctrine of Masonry, which involves the return of Apollo, Osiris. That's the reason why they have the raising ceremony that we talked about in either the second or the third hour. For that to happen, though, there are things that need to occur. Some things need to be bound, as in the influence, let's say, of the Holy Bible, or the influence of Christianity within this country. For their scheme to come to fruition, there needs to be a binding of certain influences that could hinder or even stop their plan from coming to fruition.
Sure.
Insert here what we're all about, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, Tom, this is a wonderful place. You've got me baited. We're going to have to go to a break. When we come back, we'll have you pick it up right there.
All right.
You know, animals don't watch much TV. Cows, pigs, elk, geese, squirrels, deer, even mice and rats usually choose to eat what's good for them. Isn't it interesting that when given a choice between natural and genetically modified corn, they went for the natural? What do they know that we don't? Plenty, according to the international bestseller Seeds of Deception. Before your next meal, maybe you should read Seeds of Deception.
The world is in the grip of a psychotic mass murderer. He is responsible for the deaths of untold millions of men, women, and children. His power is exercised through a network of secret societies, and it reaches into the very highest levels of governments all over the world. Examine the evidence. Draw your own conclusions. Peer into darkness with Derek Gilbert and Sharon Gilbert on PID Radio. www.pidradio.com.
We now return to RNN Radio.
This is the Wild Man of the Ozarks, Tom. When we went to the break, you had just started to explain how these cultists that have known about these plans for years and years and years, they have these plans that they've laid out that they would love to see come to fruition. But in order for those plans to occur, they have to first bind the forces of good, in this case the Bible, in order that they can successfully usher in the New World Order.
Yeah, well, that is exactly their plan, and where I was headed with all of that, it was to simply say that in order for the inevitable worship of Osiris to be reestablished on earth, these 72 demons that govern the nation, obviously they have to be controlled, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Therefore, they are set within within magical constraints on the Great Seal, the Washington obelisk, and the pentagram circles around the base of the apotheosis of Washington, in order to bind and force the desired effect of the occultists. And by the way, I'm not the first person who has talked about parts of this. I'm just the first person who put it all together. If a person studies Manly P. Hall, who is considered to be Freemasonry's greatest philosopher ever, he wrote in The Secret Destiny of America how that the 72 stones on the original pyramid on the Great Seal correspond to the 72 arrangements of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-lettered name of God in Hebrew. And he talked quite openly about how those four letters could be combined in 72 combinations that would result in what they call the Shem Hamphorish, which represents in turn the laws, the powers, the energies of nature. In other words, the powers operating behind these 72 forces on Earth could be controlled, and he admits that this is encoded upon the Great Seal of the United States. Well, it's also why those 72 stars or pentagram shapes are around the deified Freemason George Washington. Now, I know if I get drugged down, we will run out of time. So I'm going to try to say some of this as quickly as I can, and people can take it apart later. But for instance, if you look at some of the medieval books of magic, grimoires as they are known, such as the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, these are part of Kabbalistic thinking. They're part of the Freemason, Rosicrucian, metaphysician, mystical belief systems, and they're still to this day used by them. They were throughout history. They still are today. But those grimoires identify the star systems, Orion, which represents Osiris, and Pleiades, which represents Apollo, as the home of these powers, where they came from, where they will return from. And it applies great importance in these magical texts to using the pentagram shape of the stars for binding and loosing their influence. Well, Adept Rosicrucian Freemasons, they've been using those magical texts, the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, since before the founding of this country, to do just that, to bind, loose, control the 72 demons over the nation. Now, here's why this is partly important. This was not just generally known by America's founders. It was also known by Francis Bacon, whose dream of this becoming the new Atlantis was literally provided the roadmap, if you will, for these early occultists to use in setting forth what this country would be about, the secret destiny, as Manly Hall called it, the secret destiny of America. Well, the biggest names among the Freemasons were aware of this, including, for instance, people like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was one of the most influential founding fathers. He's the only one of the founding fathers that signed all of the original founding documents, including the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, the U.S. Constitution. Ben Franklin was responsible for facilitating the American Revolution by publishing the writings of Thomas Paine. He was without question, however, also deeply involved in Freemasonry and the secret societies, and he belonged to societies that most Americans would be shocked by. He belonged to secret groups on 3 continents, including being the master of the Masonic Lodge of Philadelphia. While in France, he was the master of the Nine Sisters Lodge, from which sprang the French Revolution. But in England, he joined a political group that had been founded by Sir Francis Dashwood, which was known as the Hellfire Club. Now, you're going to be talking in the next hour, as I understand it, we all will be, hopefully, talking to Chris Pinto. And he would be a perfect expert to verify what I'm saying. The Hellfire Club met during the mid-18th century primarily to mock traditional religion, including Christianity, to conduct orgies, and to involve the indulgence of satanic rites and sacrifices, including, most likely based on known evidence, human sacrifices. This was what Benjamin Franklin was part of. If you think about your chubby little Freemasonic forefather of this country, it might be hard for you to imagine that, but on February 11, 1998, the Sunday Times reported that 10 bodies had been dug up from beneath Benjamin Franklin's home at 36 Craven Street in London. And these bodies were of 4 adults, 6 children. They were discovered during a renovation of Franklin's home. And here's what the Times reported, quote, initial estimates are that the bones are about 200 years old and were buried at the time that Benjamin Franklin was living in the house, which was his home from 1757 to 1762, and from 1764 to 1775. Most of the bones show signs of having been dissected, sawn, or cut. One skull has been drilled with several holes, end quote.